Hey, everybody. So, over the last couple of weeks, you guys have gotten to see Bradley Hampton and Stephen Kripe share some of their interests and share some of the stories about times where they kind of followed their interest or followed their passion and some of the good things that came as a result of that. So, this week it's my turn. So, what I want to share with you guys is when I was in fifth grade, I wrote a little story about my class, and I used kids from my class in the story, and it was about my teacher coming in one day to school furious. My teacher at the time was engaged, and I wrote a story where two of the kids in the class had run into her with her fiance at a restaurant the night before, and they had caused such a ruckus that her fiance had decided he didn't want to marry her. And so she came in the next day just mad and just about all the ways that she tortured all of us because of how mad she was. And my class loved it. They laughed so hard just all the way through it. Everybody was thrilled by it. And I said, this is actually pretty cool. I love that I can have people like me, like my writing, get joy out of stuff I'm creating. I liked the attention, and I also liked what I did for them. And so I started getting into writing. And so all through high school, I was writing stories, and I was sending them off to professional science fiction magazines like Analog and Asimov's and Amazing Stories and some of these others. And I was getting rejection slip after rejection slip after rejection slip. It was nothing was selling, but I was still writing all these different stories and then sending them out. Back then, we couldn't use the internet to send them out. We actually had to put them in manila envelopes with a second envelope inside the envelope so they could send it back to us with the rejection letter. And then you'd have to put the stamps on the second envelope themselves or yourself so that they wouldn't have to pay to send you back your manuscript and your rejection letter. So you'd send that to them, and then they would just stick a form rejection letter in there that was like the same every time, and you get that back. And I had tons of those rejection slips from different magazines. Well, then I finished high school, and I went on my mission to Brazil, and then I came back from my mission. I finished my 2-year degree. I went to BYU. And when I went to BYU, I actually enrolled in a writing science fiction class. These days, that same class is taught by New York Times bestselling author Brandon Sanderson. He finished the Wheel of Time series. He has a bunch of stuff that's super popular. But back then, it was taught by the guy that taught the guy who taught Brandon Sanderson. So Brandon Sanderson was taught by a guy named Dave Wolverton. Dave Wolverton was taught by a guy named Doc Smith. And I took the class from Doc Smith. And so I wrote several stories while I was taking that class. And BYU actually had a magazine that they published of science fiction that you could submit stories to. And so I submitted the story that had gotten the best reaction when I read it out loud in class. I submitted that to that magazine, and BYU Leading Edge magazine bought my story. This was the first time I got paid for something that I made up out of my head. This is the story. It's called You'll See It When It's Finished by Eric Peterson, and that was in issue 37 of the Leading Edge magazine published at BYU. Now, while I was there, I also wrote more stories. I wrote one story based on me and my experiences when I was in Brazil as a missionary. I wrote a story about a guy who goes back to Brazil with his fiance, or actually with he's newlywed. He goes back to Brazil with his new bride for his honeymoon, and they are riding down the Amazon River, and they run into some of the monsters from the Indian legends. And so I had this story about a returned missionary running into monsters, and I sent it to anywhere I thought might want to look at it. Nobody wanted to touch it. Well, fast forward a lot of years later, on the internet, some people start posting that they want to publish a book about pulp style stories, like the kind of stories of like Alan Quatermain or Indiana Jones, those kind of things, only with Mormons in the stories and monsters in the stories. So they wanted some kind of combination of Mormons and monsters. And I had a story about returned missionary who ran into monsters on the Amazon jungle. So I sent the story to them, and they also paid me for my story. It's in this book, Monsters and Mormons. I have a short story that's in here called Bichos, which is the Portuguese word for creatures. And it's about the creatures that they encounter in the jungle as they go down it. This is, as you can tell, it's a big book, 30 different stories in it. But I'm in here, the same book as me is like Eric James Stone, who's won the Nebula Award, Dan Wells, who is also a big selling author. Pretty exciting stuff. So this was, after I got married, my first publication in a book instead of just a magazine. Now, around this time, I started selling to other books and magazines. For example, Leading Edge bought another one of my stories a few years later. They bought a story of mine called His Full 15 Minutes. Just fair warning, this is not a happy story, but they did. The Amazon review says this is definitely the most powerful story in this issue. And so I sold that. And then I have a story in this anthology called Once Upon a Future Time that is retellings of tall tales and fairy tales, but in a science fiction setting. I have a story in here that's based on Alfred Bulltop Stormalong, who's kind of like the Paul Bunyan of the ocean. And I retold it as if it happened in space instead of in the ocean. And that story is called Albert Bolide Spicule Battles Architeuthis Ducks. And that is Architeuthis ducks. It basically means giant squid, but it's a space squid, not an ocean squid. Now, that's cool, and it's cool to be published in anthologies and magazines like that. But of course, what every author wants is their own book with their own name on it. So my brother-in-law actually started a publishing company, and he had published a couple of alphabet books, and he was like, I want to do a counting book now. Eric, could you write a counting book that we could do with cool illustrations? And so he published this book. It's called The Dragon and the Princess, and we carefully worked out this book so that it would work as a counting book, as a storybook, and as a look and find book. So this book counts from 1 up to 10, and then it counts back down to 1 again, as it tells the story of a baby dragon and a princess who have a little play date together after the baby dragon is born. And we tried to make some of the illustrations to where there's lots of things you can look for. You know, like you just kind of notice what some of the cool things are. Like, I'll bet Josh K knows what that is right there. Stuff like that. So that was my first book ever published that had my name on it. And I even went to WonderCon in Anaheim, and I did a signing at my publisher's table. So that was kind of fun. But that book, if you notice, is big pictures. Whoa, where'd we go? Big pictures and a little bit of words. So, of course, you know, I want to write a story that's little pictures and big bunch of my words. And so my first book of that was this one. It's called Once Upon a Time a Bit Earlier. And the idea with this book is the evil magic mirror that the Dark Queen has. Snow White finds that mirror, and when the mirror realizes that the queen's been beaten, the mirror casts a spell back through time to warn Snow White to warn the evil queen about Snow White, while Snow White is still just a little girl. And so that ends up changing the Snow White story because it's starting too soon. Like, she's too little to, want to kiss a prince or whatever. So then that ends up changing the big bad wolf. It's earlier, so he's kind of right now just the pretty bad wolf. He's not quite the big bad wolf yet. He's the pretty bad wolf. And then Rapunzel, her hair's only down to the middle of her back. So all these fairy tales end up starting too soon. And then, oh, wait a minute. What's this one, though? For some reason, it's Old Red Riding Hood instead of Little Red Riding Hood. What's up with that? I don't know. Maybe the book knows. But that is, they end up all kind of coming together into one big story where they end up having to find out why all these old ladies want to kill all these little girls. And even, and this is a secret, this is between you and me, why there's so many different versions of fairy tales. So that is what I like to do. I like to write, and these are some of the successes that I've had in my writing. Now that the Bishopric has shared, we would love for you guys to share. We want to know from you, what are the things that you're into? What are the things that maybe you have a collection of something that you're proud of and you want us to see your collection? Maybe it's something that you've built that is cool that you want us to see. Or maybe it's something you've been working on for a while. Whatever it is, please share with us your hobbies and the things you're passionate about, and make a short video like the ones that we've been uploading over the past couple of weeks. You could show us around your collection. You could take us out through your garden that you've worked carefully on. Whatever the thing is that's for you, let us see it and let us know about your passion and why you love it. And we are eager to hear those things. So once you've uploaded the video to YouTube or to Facebook, shoot us the link. Let us know so we can share it around as much as we can. We want to know what our ward is into and cares about. What are we passionate about? So please, please, please let us know. We are eager to see. Don't think, oh, mine's kind of silly. Nobody cares. Somebody cares. I care. I love you. I love what you're into. And I think what you're going to find out is who the other people are who also care about that. And you can make those connections that you wouldn't have if you hadn't put that video out there so we could know about the thing you were into. So looking forward to see it. Send it in.